Hey guys, how's it going? Today we will be discussing the question before you, and although it is simple in terms, it is not so simple to answer. A question such as this usually requires a larger discussion, and therefore I would really like it if you voiced your own opinion in the comment section below. Hopefully this video will provide a baseline for discussion, something for you to respond to, etc., and feel free to critique my opinion in any way you see fit. Now, I think something that we have to get out of the way, Zodiacs and True Dracos will likely not be a major part of our meta following the ban list. Hits to cards such as Trident, Barrage, and Broadbull will take Zodiac out of the meta completely, and True Draco's position will likely be very minimized by hits to Dragonic Diagram and Masterpiece. Of course, we don't know this for 100% sure, but we can be fairly certain. Also, the hits to Diagram could tank Dino Yang Zing out of the meta. That's a little less clear, and so I won't really discuss them in the rest of this video, but do keep that in mind. Now, I think some of the other decks that we have to discuss first are those that people have really been hyping up that we had in the meta before we had our Norden Xyz Spam Zodiac format, right before WCQ, right before the banning of Norden. And the four decks I've decided that were most significant in this category were ABCs, Paleozoics, Cosmos, and Infernoids. Now, ABCs are a deck that a lot of people have been talking about in particular, and it was seeing some success in the OCG. It likely now will not, since it received hits on the Forbidden Limited list there, the one that was released, I think, the day before this video is probably going to go out. So there is that. There is some evidence that they will continue to do well coming out of the True Draco era. However, something that really has not had any success in the OCG is Paleozoics, and that really extends to their very birth. They've never really been that successful in the OCG, partially because of their card pool, including cards such as Harpy's Feather Duster. Also, Totally Awesome got limited, I believe, relatively early in their lifespan. They just really never took off, and I think that that's something that could really harm ABCs. I think many of you will remember the 60-card Paleo format that we had before Norden Spam Zodiacs that came along with the release of Chakanine, and I don't really see any reason why ABCs would have any kind of upper hand on Paleozoics now. They are both somewhat restricted by the Master Rule for Link Summoning rules, but I think in the end it really kind of evens out, and Paleozoics should still have a pretty hefty upper hand on ABCs. And I think that extends to most of their matchups. Paleozoics were dominating most of the decks of that time, and there really isn't a reason why they shouldn't now, which is why I'm fairly confident in the deck's performance going into the next format. I don't think it gets talked about nearly enough, and it's probably an extension of them not really having any success in the OCG. What has success in the OCG is usually what ends up getting hyped up here. ABC's doing fairly well, therefore they've been getting more hype. Paleozoics have not, therefore they have not received the hype. But I think that that's a really using the OCG as a gauge on our own format is always not the best, and I think the card pool changes between formats really makes a huge difference. Moving on, we have Cosmos. They haven't really done anything in a while. I don't really know why this deck is so hyped up. I mean, yes, it does not use the extra deck. It is not affected by Master Rule 4. However, if it wasn't really doing anything against ABCs and Paleozoics, I think it's pretty safe to say that they won't have a major impact now. They still have one Dark Destroyer. Link Summoning really, the restrictions just don't do a whole lot for them. It doesn't really drag down a lot of other decks, and in no way does it help them. And I think for that reason, Cosmos, They could be good, but I think that there's a lot more question marks surrounding the deck than I think people seem to think there are. They seem to kind of just be locked into this mindset of, oh, they don't really use the extra deck and therefore they're good now. And they could be, but we don't know. Infernoids are an interesting one. They were particularly successful with the 60 card grass builds using Burning Abyss. I hear a lot of discussions both about pure, definitely abusing Void Feast, a very powerful trap card, but also using Burning Abyss variants. You could argue that those are hurt more by Master Rule 4, although you likely aren't making more than one Dante anyway. Either way, both variants are interesting. I would put more confidence in them than Cosmo. I think that there's a lot more evidence they can succeed. They have had a handful of tops during this format, competing against Zodiac and True Draco, and so I think there's reason to believe that they will continue to have some amount of success. And yeah, I think that about covers it for these four. Once again, ABCs having success in the OCG, likely to continue to have success, provided that Paleozoic does not prove too great an adversary. I think it's very likely that Paleozoic becomes the best deck of the new format. I'm just going to put that out right now. That's kind of where I'm at. Cosmo, we have a lot of question marks surrounding it, and Infernoids, still some question marks, but I think there's some reason to believe they can succeed. Now, going into the newer decks, we have Lightsworns, newer Pendulum Magicians, Trickstars, and World Chalice. Now, I suppose we'll start with Lightsworn. They got Minerva, the Exalted Lightsworn, reprinted. The deck's kind of been around a while, but it hasn't really been played at a larger scale. And the zombie variants and such have been having a fair bit of success this format so far. I think they will have expanded success once True Dracos and Zodiacs are now out of the metagame. I think that it's a deck with a very high ceiling. I think it's a little reliant on combo pieces and doesn't necessarily have as much room for things like hand traps, which in some ways is not a big deal. I think some decks like ABCs, you don't necessarily need a ton of hand traps to deal with. And Paleozoic's hand traps don't help anyway. Although I do think their matchups against both can be a little shaky, which makes me concerned for the deck. But otherwise, I think it's a combo deck with a very high ceiling. It's already seeing success. That's a very positive sign. Pendulum Magicians, on the other hand, we got them kind of during the Chuck and I Norden spam Zodiac format, and they had a little bit of success. I do think Master Rule 4 hurt them tremendously. Obviously, all Pendulum decks received a pretty heavy nerf. They have not really seen any success recently at all, and I don't really believe there to be any reason that they would be particularly strong in this meta. I think they will still be a rogue contender. Just a lot of people are talking about the deck as though it's going to suddenly be really good again, and I'm not really seeing it. Now we have the two newest archetypes, two of the newest archetypes, the two newest on out of the decks that we're discussing here that came out in the last set. Trickstars and World Chalice. Trickstars are a very interesting deck. They have a burn mechanic and are also fairly good at spamming out monsters to make for link summons. There are many variants. There's a Wind Witch variant, which is a little more reliant on using Crystal Wing to stall so that they can reach their win condition. There's some more pure burn builds, etc. I think it's a very interesting deck that is already having success. I think it is not super reliant on the format it's in, which makes me think that, as a deck that is sort of alternate win condition, it's sort of an odd case, but I think it sort of halfway falls into an alternate win condition category, and so I think it'll continue to do well, and I think it'll do even better once True Dracos and Zodiac are gone, and maybe some of the more aggro-y type builds with Wind Witches will be a lot stronger. And then with World Chalice, I'll admit I'm not a big expert on World Chalice, and I don't know how qualified I am really to speak on the matter, but they've had one or two tops, but from what I have seen of them, there isn't really a huge reason to believe that they're going to be that amazing. They definitely do seem like a decent rogue contender, but they don't really have, a lot of really powerful boards that just win the game, or their main win condition seems to be really heavily focused on Firewall Dragon. And while that's fine, I don't think it's going to quite bring them to the top. Again, I think they could continue to be a fine rogue contender, but I think they fall into a similar category as Pendulum Magicians in that they do some good things, but I just don't think they're there. In the case of Pendulum Magicians, I think Master 04 hurt them way too much. In the case of World Chalice, I just don't think the decks really was... I don't think Konami really designed the archetype with the idea of them being tier 1 in mind. And so this is just kind of the last part of the video where I'm going to recap sort of how I feel. Lightsworns, Paleozoics, Trickstars, ABCs, I think they all have great things going for them. Again, Lightsworn's very high ceiling, really interesting, consistent deck. I think it's going to do... It's been doing well, and I think it will continue to do so. Paleozoics, it was the strongest deck pre Chakanai and Zodiacs, kind of before the Zodiac True Draco takeover. It was the best deck. I think it very well could be the singular best deck again. Trickstar's very interesting deck that is having success already, and I don't really see any reason why that should stop, and it will likely improve drastically as it only has to compete with weaker strategies. ABCs, we saw in the OCG that they were starting to do very well again, and I think they should follow suit. I'm a little more nervous about their Paleozoic matchup, but I don't think that will stop them. Cosmos and Infernoids, I think there are some question marks about. I think Infernoids have made a much stronger case for themselves, but they are both cases of non-extract reliant decks that seem like they could be good, but we just don't really know. In the case of Cosmos, there's just really not a large track record recently of them having much regional success. Infernoid's a little more so, but we'll see. World Chalice and Pendulum Magicians, I think, are no-goes. I would not invest in them personally. Not that either of them are super expensive, but I just don't think that they are. I wouldn't plan on playing them if you're looking at playing tier 1 decks. They're just not going to be anywhere close. I don't think they're going to be particularly meta relevant. Of course, they might pick off some regional tops here and there, but they aren't really making it into YCS top 64s. And that should conclude this video. Again, I would like to extend an offer to all of you to voice your comment in the comment section below. Your opinion in the comments section below, that is. And I really look forward to reading them, and I think we can get a pretty good conversation started. So, until my next video, I will talk to you guys later.